All right, what's up, Ego Hackers? It is CS Joseph, and we are live at 9:41 p.m. Pacific Standard Time because why not? This is the community of Whiplash because me being an ENTP, that's my favorite thing to do is just whiplash people at all times. Welcome to the show. We just decided to do a very awesome live stream for you folks this evening. I have Mr. John Bodine with us right here, and I'm controlling the camera angles as I go. And this is the first time that John has decided to appear on camera for us, which is pretty incredible to have him, and also the first time he's also been on the Ego Hacker Discord. And folks, if you want to get on the Ego Hacker Discord and maybe even potentially be on the show this evening, that is at discord.gg/Ego Hackers. Make sure that you guys get in on the Ego Hacker Discord. We are constantly talking about Jungian analytical psychology every single day. We're talking about four sides of the mind. We're talking about octagram. We're talking about Rosetta Stone, cognitive origins, basically all of the things. And we also have our special interest groups targeting education, sexuality, and obviously the sexuality special interest group is the most active and the most popular that we have on the server. And which is kind of interesting because it has led to the creation of actual sexual relationships within the community, which is kind of cool that we have that opportunity, and also some children being born and conceived as well. So special thanks to the team.
One often follows the other.
Yes, yes. As they said when I was a child, spooning always leads to forking. So.
I might have to add that.
Are you gonna add that to the T-shirt? Yeah, that. Okay. All right. So yes, John is here with us, and he is our writer and editor on the blog, csjoseph.life/blog. He has had some incredible insight, also along with Chris Taylor and Robert Potts and other members of the creative team. And to be able to have those insights for us. And John has come up with an amazing system relating to ego hacking your fear, because that is what this episode is about. We are discussing our new product, which is Ego Hacking Your Fear, and that is available at egohackingyourfear.com. And, I'm just going to give you guys a quick tour of it. I'm going to actually pull up the page right now so you guys can check it out. But yes, egohackingyourfear.com brings you here. And you have the opportunity to get the pre-order pricing. And by the way, when you actually buy the course, you also get the prequel series, which is season 19. And I believe, so that's pretty awesome that you get that. You get immediate season 19 access, which is pretty dope. I mean, why wouldn't you want that? So, we made this page to educate you guys on what Ego Hacking Your Fear is all about. And basically, the entire point of this course, and it's like 30 hours of like video content.
Wow.
Yeah, it's more than 30 hours. We know that. Like it's definitely going to be more. It's huge. I mean, we just filmed the INFJ one recently, and that's the INFJ section is like 2 hours long, and the ENTP section is also 2 hours long. It's just insane how much effort. So John, I have some questions for you. Like, what in your from your perspective, what exactly does the audience, what do ego hackers need to know about this course? Like, what does it do for them? What do they get out of it? Since you're triple interest based, of course.
Right.
Talk to us.
So I'll talk a little bit about kind of the inception of the course and kind of what made me want to do it to begin with. And this goes back a couple of years ago. Even I remember I came to with the idea a couple of years ago, and you said, there will be a time for that for sure. And then a few months ago, we brought it up again and talked about it, and it was the right time. So I think the big thing for me, and that's captured in the title of the course, Ego Hacking Your Fear, is, I'm an SE user, and I've seen a lot of people in my life, and I've even experienced myself, times where you're just paralyzed by fear and you can't do anything, right? And I think the worst thing, and I think that experience is even worse for SE users because they value their freedom so much, so that the paralysis that you experience with your fear is constantly preventing you from pursuing the things that you want or getting the things that you would like to put your attention towards. And from a Soul Temple perspective, for me, it's all about you can't really understand someone until I don't think you can seek the deeper essence of their identity until they are freed from their fear. I think one of the quotes we had in the first few lectures of the series was, when the fear is removed, the true self is revealed. And for me, as the interest space, as a Soul Temple perspective, a big part of that is just understanding who someone is when they are given the tools to move past their fear. Ultimately, though, it's just seeking that freedom to live a life not determined by your fear, but determined by the things that you love, the things that you care about. And I think that paralysis that so many of us experience is just, it is one of the most devastating things to your psychological growth and to getting the things that you want, but I think also getting the things that would be good for you. So as far as an interest-based perspective, that's some of the foundation for why I wanted to do this course to begin with.
I'm so glad you have, and like at the core of this at the absolute core of this course that we are presenting, you came up with the concept of cognitive circuits, where we're talking about gateway circuit and the guidance circuit. Right. Shortly after I presented the concept of the guidance functions, and I believe I did that in a cutting edge episode. It could have been
you and Chris did it. I believe.
The guidance functions, and it was a really great situation to see you just run with that and turn it into what we have today. And now we have an entire framework. Basically, it's a pathway. It's a pathway that someone can take to reach cognitive integration and be even further on the path to enlightenment. And we talk about season 19, which is the prequel to this course, EgoHacking Your Fear. And in season 19, we talk about optimizing your gateways. Make sure you're not having an orderly flow instead of a chaotic flow into your gateways. And gateways are basically gateway functions. That's your hero, your inferior, and your nemesis, and your demon function. Your hero function gives you access to your ego. Your inferior function gives you access to your subconscious. Your nemesis gives you access to your shadow, and your demon gives you access to your superego. And these are representing neural pathways. But guidance functions are ultimately what is controlling the flow. It is basically, they are influencing the gateway functions in order to have healthier cognitive transitions, orderly cognitive transitions, so that they could have a better use of the different sides of the mind. But more specifically, like, how is it, from your perspective, when we're dealing with the grips of fear, how is it that, when we're in this chaotic state, when we don't have the guidance from the guidance functions, how does that actually make fear manifest more in our lives?
Sure. So I'll talk a little bit about the mechanics of it, and we can have can continue this conversation. So one of the things that I talked about in the article back late last year, when we introduced cognitive circuits, and one of the things we talked about in the course is how this concept in like physical therapy of referred pain, or even in general medicine, where the place where you have pain, say you have pain in your wrist or your forearm, is often not the main source or the only source of what's causing that injury. Oftentimes, if you have pain in your glutes, for example, there's stuff involved with your hamstring and your knees. So this idea of referred pain, even though it's a very typically used with the body, it can very much be used for a psychological approach as well. So when you're looking at someone who's in this fearful state, for example, of their inferior is in their grips of fear, the cognitive circuit, which is just a combination of cognitive axis, orbit, and reflection, but it's those sewn together into a cohesive map or cohesive system. It allows you to see where the fear is actually coming from, because the inferior is not really responsible for taking care of itself. Just as an infant in a family is not responsible for taking care of itself, right? That would be absurd. Instead, within the gateway circuit, it's the hero, the nemesis, and the demon that are directly influencing the inferior. just as the parent and the critic also influence it secondarily within the guidance circuit. But with the concept of referred pain and this idea of trying to move out of the fear of your inferior, you start with the inferior and you see that there's fear there, but then you back up. And what you'll find is that when there's fear in the inferior, there's often always simultaneously pride in the hero when the hero is trying to do too much, or when it's resting on its heroic power and not sharing that energy with the inferior. And there's often ignorance with the nemesis, often leading with assumptions. And there's often repression or hatred at times with the demon. And when these three other parts of the circuit, the inferior being the fourth part, when the other three parts are stuck in a chaotic mode, pride, ignorance, and hate or repression, the inferior has no choice but to be afraid. So this kind of base idea of referred pain is how we kind of practically apply the cognitive circuits of like when you are feeling fear, when you're feeling paralysis in your inferior, it's a sign that you need to back up and look at the other attached functions, because it's usually very rarely the inferior's fault, right, for being for having you caught in a state of fear. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but I wanted to give some background context.
Well, it certainly does. It certainly does, because like you said something very fascinating, that the inferior function itself is not responsible for taking care of itself, right? And I think that right there might actually be the core reason, or the main reason, as to why human beings require relationships with other human beings. Because it's really nice when someone else's functions are taking care of your inferior, instead of you having to bear that entire responsibility on your own. However, we can't really actually have an opportunity to reach cognitive integration, or ultimately enlightenment as we know it, where we are integrating all four sides of our mind, our ego, our subconscious, our unconscious, and our superego, and integrating all of them and becoming a complete human being, without gaining the ability to actually take care of our own inferior itself. It's nice when we're being enabled by third parties, but at the end of the day, in order for us to get to the highest heights of our own life and have that complete life, we need to actually learn over time how to develop the mental skills and the mental abilities through our own cognitive functions, through our own cognitive circuits, basically, to be able to take care of our inferior function. And I think it's very fascinating that you utilize that as an example. So, with that being said, from a circuit perspective, like, you see the guidance functions, taking on potentially a more influential, maybe even a feminine role within the mind. And the gateways, and it's kind of more passive in the gateway circuit.
They're the neck, right? Like
the neck, yeah. In the gateway circuit is taking a more active, albeit masculine type role within the mind. So, but which one is more important than the other, or isn't it? Like,
sure.
Walk us through that.
So what you and I have been talking about in the course is that the gateway functions are kind of the star of the show, right? As we talked about, each of them are the apex of that side of the mind. So they're more kind of exciting, and there's more kind of this dynamic energy going on between them. But as far as psychological development goes, and as far as being able to consciously tune in to the things that make you afraid and move that fear into courage, it's all about the guidance functions. And this was something Chris Taylor Rocca, and you were both on from the very beginning when you guys introduced the cognitive circuits and that cutting edge. And I'd still highly recommend people check that out, because that will give you kind of the pre-foundation that so much of this course is committed to kind of processing through. But the guidance functions are the pessimistic energy in our psyches, right? They're the parent and the inferior function of any given side of the mind. And they are what enable us, when we use them, and we use them consciously and we use them intentionally, they are what enable us to really be consistently free from our fear. And they are kind of the secret piece to, I think, creating a lifestyle that is moving more towards courage instead. Because the gateway circuit is kind of, as a whole, a little bit more expedient, right? There's so much energy. There's the Titans, and there's a battleground of inhibition. There's passion. There's fear. There's all these things. But the guidance circuit is a little bit more subtle, right? It's a little bit more careful and calculated, and it's completely necessary to give the inferior the tools to aspire and to consistently aspire. And the way it does this is that when we use the parent function, it actually directly supports the inferior function. Just as for like an INFJ with FE parent and SE inferior, us being helpful to others or being aware of where value could be, as we talked about in the INFJ lecture. This is actually what helps cultivate our capacity to perform with confidence instead of just being, just imagining all the ways things could go wrong, right? So it's kind of funny that the theme of the parent is responsibility versus carelessness. And if you want a quick kind of maxim for ego hacking your fear, it is to embrace the responsibility that you are equipped to be aware of within your psyche. And that's, of course, the parent function. I feel like I sound like Jordan Peterson here, but that is sort of, it's funny to me that aligns on a technical level within the cognitive circuit, as well as, a more philosophical level as well. So, yeah, the guidance functions they really are where the magic happens, even though they might not seem as exciting initially.
So with that, there's a thought I had, and for some reason I had lost it, but
it'll come back.
Yeah, it'll come back eventually. But when it comes to like people dealing with their fear alone, like we talk about like the cognitive circuits and the different perspectives that each of the functions have and how they actually affect each other, even how they're kind of like daisy chained, almost kind of like an Ouroboros or some kind of like double helix, actually. As the functions themselves are sequenced and everything affects one another. Does this mean that they're, when it comes to the guidance circuits versus the gateway circuits, is there ultimately like some kind of hierarchy? Like, is there a hierarchy that is always followed in terms of certain things, or is it because we have axis and orbit and reflection and even looping to a point where from that point of view, like, is there a hierarchy, or are we able to actually utilize this information to ego hack ourselves from whatever perspective we intend to?
When you say hierarchy, are you asking if there's certain functions that are more important to prioritize first in terms of orderly access, or is it asking
or can else? I just start anywhere? Can I just like, I should probably work on my child function a little bit more, or
right.
I should work on this? Like my question is like, how do we know what to prioritize when? Is it based on like, this is the sickest patient, or is there an actual predefined process, or is it situational?
Yeah. So if we're looking at conquering the inferior, and I actually don't think conquering is the right term, but cultivating and providing the inferior with the things that it needs, I think it has to start with the hero, and the reason why is because nothing's going to happen in your personality sphere, in the box of your type, until your hero chooses to give up some of its power, or at least recognize that its power is insufficient for sharing the tools with the rest of your mind, and especially with your inferior function. And that's why the theme of the hero is pride versus humility. So it starts with the hero just being open to like, well, I might need some help, right? And that is the hardest thing for a hero to admit of it needing the assistance of other functions in this case. And once it does that, it opens the door for certainly the rest of the gateway circuit, the nemesis, the demon, etc. But it really opens the door for the parent's voice to be heard, because a hero doesn't want to hear the constraint of the responsibility that a parent function brings, but the humility that leads to responsibility of the parent actually brings the parent forward and says, the hero says, I can't do this alone, or I need something more here, and then that enables the parent to kind of dictate a little bit to the hero, but mostly just guide the hero, just as it is the guidance function for the ego, right? And those two functions, you can look at the four sides of the mind, and through a cognitive axis perspective, the top two functions of each side of the mind are kind of where all the magic happens at first. And you could think of a transition into the subconscious as a orderly access of your hero and parent And then those two functions share both their power with the child and the inferior. And that is what enables an orderly transition, just as the inferior is the gateway into the subconscious and the child is the guidance function into the subconscious. That it really just starts at our home base with our hero and with our parent. There's some differences here with people with different octagram development, such as your type, the UDUF. But ultimately, if you're still trying to get into your subconscious, you're going to want to come back to your ego first. It's just going to be a longer road back than it would be for most of the typical variants. So hero and parent are where it starts.
Well, I think that's definitely the case. I am a little biased, being unconscious developed, unconscious focused, from an octagram perspective, being way too friendly with my superego and living basically primarily in my shadow, even to the point where
what's your perspective on that for yourself? And I know you have a different relationship with your inferior as it is siphoned more through the demon. Do you have any wisdom to share for atypicals like the UDUFs, for example?
I think that from a UDUF perspective, from my octagram perspective, I overprotect my inferior way too much. I'm very overprotective of it, and it kind of makes sense. It makes sense because how does a person become UDUF? UDUF, unconscious developed, unconscious focus, literally comes from basically, it's a survival mode mind state, basically. The environment that you grew up in and the environment that you were in your adulthood just sucked 100% of the time. And your brain develops its neural pathways. It handles its neural pathways, for example, the gateway circuit. That's basically neural pathways. And then the guidance circuit controls the neural pathways through its influence, basically, and how the information throughout the brain is moving. But my gateway circuit was developed in to prioritize survival above anything else. And I'm a very good survivor, but I'm really bad at thriving. Very good at surviving, very bad at thriving, basically.
Do you even get to a point where you feel uncomfortable when things are going well because your mind's so used to things being just a shit show all the time?
Every single time. Yeah. I actually find myself becoming the most afraid when things are going well. Because it's like, ooh, I so desperately don't want to lose the good times, and it's like I'm holding a bunch of sand in my hand and I'm just crushing it, and it's just like escaping through my hand, basically. And I end up becoming biased towards adversity because I'm so used to adversity that I can't let go of adversity at all. And it's really frustrating. It's entirely frustrating that happens consistently.
Let me ask you another question then
Sure.
the information that you and I have presented in this course and the depths that we've gone to in our conversation. If you were to take this and maybe speak to an earlier version of yourself or other ENTPs that you can relate to, are there one or two things that you could take away primarily if you wanted to share to someone maybe who isn't really even familiar with the psychology and give them little nuggets? It's kind of an FI question, but I'm curious if you have.
Yeah, we really exposed just how presumptive, I can be within the ENTP section of the course, for sure. And I would tell my younger self to just not be presumptive and really have the attitude that Socrates has, was like, the only thing I truly know is that I know nothing. But beyond that is that, like, when you're UDUF and you're faced with adversity consistently, your trickster function has a really hard time to achieve mastery. And the thing is that people end up offering things up to me all the time. And for a long time, I was very ignorant, and I decided to not take what was offered, for example. And the best way I can describe that is, like, for example, if someone tells me to read a book, nowadays I immediately write it down. I go to audible.com immediately, see if it's available, then I wish list it, right? And then since I have a subscription with Audible, I see credits fill in, over time, and then I just purchase the books, and then I eventually read them, and I eventually get through them eventually. It's my goal to read 26 books a year. It's funny, like last week I read 5 books, just did last week alone.
Right, on your vacation.
Yeah, I went to Disneyland, and when you're
often.
standing in line, for rides, and your children are all on their phones or whatever, and you're in Disneyland, you can definitely get in a lot of reading, and of course, being in Disneyland, I met some ESTJ there with an ISTP woman and all of their family, which is three girls. They have an ESTP daughter, an INTJ daughter, and an ISFP daughter, and I typed them all and walked them through the whole situation. That was pretty fun situation, and they joined the Ego Hacker community as a result of that. So that's pretty awesome. But the point is that like I for a long time I would refuse help because I would see help as a threat, because help would be that thing that if times are good, and help is representative of good times, if times are good, things could happen. Because like when you have a childhood like I had, childhood is usually what a person would equate to should be good times most of the time when you are a child. So I'm equating bad times with good times very easy because of how, the abuse in my life has caused me to be UDUF. I mean, Railgun is the same. She has the same issue. Although I think for her, like the pain is even far greater in a lot of ways, because for me it's like, I expect adversity, but she doesn't expect adversity, even though adversity follows her everywhere she goes, because she's still UDUF anyway. Whereas from my perspective, I'm comfortable with adversity, whereas she's still uncomfortable with adversity. She's just hypersensitive to it, right? That's not necessarily her fault, right? And from that perspective, like within my own life, I ended up, being on this journey when it became UDUF, because like, for my functions, I had to sacrifice my child function. It was not accepted at all. It was like I had no divine power, no divinity, no innocence. It didn't mean anything. So I sacrificed it to my demon function, and ultimately my superego, and my superego consumed my child.
Further, and probably say that your innocence was violated, which is, I think, if
right.
any function is going to be violated, the child, the divine child, is one of the hardest to recover from that. So anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And someone in the audience, Yasmin, says, so you're kind of masochistic with life. And yes, I really am kind of masochistic with life. And I guess that's why, from like a BDSM perspective, we just launched the new BDSM channel in the Sexuality SIG, actually, for lulz, because we had everyone in the Sexuality SIG take the BDSMtest.org, that test. And so we're keeping track of people with verified types to see what their results are, to see if there's a correlation and whatnot, which is really fascinating. And I took the test, and I scored, super dominant, master, and rigor, and it's like, okay, yeah, it makes sense, because and I have been like, accused throughout my life of being controlling, but the reason why I'm so controlling as an UDUF ENTP, especially from like a BDSM perspective, and it's because I am overprotective of my inferior function, right? I'm way overprotective of my inferior function. And so from an ego hacking your fear perspective, this actually creates more fear. I get more afraid when times are good than when times are actually bad. And it's completely twisted, with me being a UDUF individual. It's entirely twisted.
Let's dig into that a little bit more for yourself.
Sure, let's do it.
You're SI inferior. You're all about familiarity, right?
Yeah.
And if you have an SI user, especially an SI inferior who is UDUF, they are most comfortable with the circumstances that probably push them into that UDUF circumstance, even though they're not happy and they're not thriving, but they're used to it. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why someone like yourself, who's almost afraid of things going well, right? Afraid of being happy even, that can be a huge struggle because of that familiarity. And it's almost like you have a Stockholm syndrome to suffering itself. It's like,
preach.
This is strange.
It is. I mean, you've seen me. You personally have seen me at my worst in my life, and it is right. I do have a Stockholm syndrome to suffering. Not unlike that dog in the cage, and you're petting the dog in the cage, but he's screaming at you, right? Because he expects the adversity. And there's times in my life where I will create adversity in order to return back to that comfort zone. And this is why UDUF people, especially UDUF ENPs with SI inferior, really struggle to get out of UDUF. And the thing is, I did sacrifice my child to the demon in exchange for its power because I needed my superego's power in order for me to survive, basically. But then I got so deep into it, I ended up sacrificing my hero. And then my NI nemesis basically became my new hero, basically, because my actual hero function did not really matter that much. So I'm already compromised with the gateway to my ego and one of my guidance functions instantly within my ego, and just gave that to my demon. Well, what is the superego's goal here? The superego is trying to consume the inferior, okay? And this is what we talked about before. For those of you who are watching, I highly recommend you guys watch Neil Gaiman's The Sandman on Netflix, right? And there is a particular scene, hashtag spoiler alert, don't care, get over it. But there's a scene in it where one of the villains gets the Philosopher's Stone of the Sandman, and the Sandman is also known as Morpheus, and the Sandman basically has this, and he's an INFP. He is a philosopher type. He's an INFP, and INFPs are all about Philosopher's Stone and their recipe for success. The instant I win button. So he has this Philosopher's Stone, also known as his ruby, actually stolen by one of the villains. And the villain uses it to basically consume the inferior functions of other characters in the story, basically. He's literally consuming their inferior functions. He's literally consuming their dreams. He's consuming their aspirations. He's consuming their inferiors. And where this character is literally like this mega super ego, basically, that is eating the inferior functions of other people. And when their inferior functions are ultimately consumed, they have nothing else to live for. And when they do that, they do reprehensible behaviors, heinous behaviors, and then eventually they all self-destruct and basically kill themselves, basically self-annihilate in every one of those situations. And it's because they have nothing left to live for, right? That's why the inferior function is absolutely critical to a human being's success. This is why the course EgoHacking Your Fear exists specifically, because, from my perspective, I'm a UDUF person. I've already lost my child function. I've already lost my hero function to my superego. My superego's tendrils of influence, right? Like this seeping muck coming out of this dark swamp is just entirely consumed my shadow, and has a lot, and it's seeping into my ego right now, and it is trying so hard to get to what we call the Holy of Holies, which is ultimately the subconscious, and it really wants the inferior function when it is in the Holy of Holies at the center of that temple, and it wants to eat it, but the only thing standing in the way of it is the parent function. So if you're UDUF and you give up on your personal responsibility from your parent function when you're UDUF, what ends up happening is that your parent function will finally be consumed by your superego, and then it will have free access to the Holy of Holies and go right for your inferior function and eat it too. And then when that happens, you suffer psychotic break, basically, and you have nothing left to live for. And that's when people start committing heinous crimes. They go crazy, all sorts of things, and then they ultimately it just ends in suicide eventually. And that's why you got to be really careful around UDUF people, because it's really important that they do always have their dreams and their aspirations absolutely protected. And UDUF people naturally overprotect their own inferior function, right? I mean, I've had to deal with that with people in my life consistently who are UDUF. I mean, I had a best friend who was an INFJ. We actually talked about him a little bit recently, and his extroverted sensing inferior, he protected it all the time, even to the point where he would refuse to even participate in anything where he would have to perform. And he would avoid a performance entirely, because he was just trying to protect his inferior as much as possible, because no one ever gave him that positive reaction, that positive feedback, or even gave him the room to fail, gave him the room to practice. He never had that before. And it got to a point where he, for the first time in his life, he actually was starting to perform. He did find someone that he was in a relationship with that did trust him enough, that had the ability to stick around for him and to weather his storm and to give him the opportunity to practice, to be a better man, to be a better boyfriend, to be a better lover, to be a better performer in life. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she rejected him. And it was like literally like the first time in his life that he got himself to that point. And then what was his reaction? He lost everything. He let go of his personal responsibility entirely, got really heavily involved with drugs and alcohol, and then he killed himself, basically. And I buried him. I carried him to his grave. I put him in the ground. Very, very sad story. And I've had two best friends in my life kill themselves now, which was really sad and very, very painful for me. But the thing is, though, is that like that's why we have this course, folks. We have this course, especially for those of you like me out there who or like Railgun out there who are UDUF people. Like this, you could utilize this to ego hack yourself. That's the whole point behind this course. We are here to give you guys the tools to ego hack yourself so that you don't have to rely on external sources and actually have some kind of game plan, some kind of step-by-step process that you can actually go through to improve yourself to a higher degree, so that as a result of that, you actually are capable of having a complete life. You can have that healing in your life. Even if you're UDUF, even if you're not UDUF, even if your octogram is one of the typicals, which is UDSF or SDUF, or if it's SDSF, the other atypical, it doesn't matter. Because, it still is technically a one-size-all solution, because guess what? From a cognitive circuit perspective, the gateway circuit and the guidance circuit, they all interact with each other basically the same, and the behaviors may manifest. The only thing that changes is that based on the differences in your nurture from an octogram point of view, is that you may prefer certain functions or certain areas within the circuits that you kind of live in the most. But then that shows you and exposes you what areas that you could be working on, right? And that's the entire point we're trying to get at here.
With the addition of octogram development, it'll change your starting point of how you develop your inferior. You also brought up a couple of things I want to mention as kind of previews to more of the content in the course. So you've said a couple of times about your UDUF-ness, being overprotective of your inferior. And one of the things we spend the majority of the intro parts of the course talking about is the idea of exposing your inferior, and that being the vehicle that moves your inferior to courage, basically. Because if you think about the inferior as an infant, it is sort of trying to explore this unknown world around it, and that's why children and babies learn so fast, is because they don't have anything to refer to, so they have to expose themselves to their environment, to the things around them. And for the inferior function, you have to expose yourself to whatever function is in your inferior, whether it's SI, whether it's getting new experiences, whether it's TI inferior, getting new input to process through. The idea of letting your inferior, taking the armor off of your inferior, at least at times, is one of the main vehicles that moves it into aspiration. And the second thing that you were talking about for UDUF types needing something to live for, and that's why they cling to their inferior function, even on a thematic level, the inferior being the infant, it is the youngest function in the entire psyche, right? There's no one younger than the infant within our 8 cognitive attitudes. And the reason that's important and why it's important for survival is that the inferior represents the future, right? It is the next generation. And one of the other lectures we have at the beginning of the course is talking about how the inferior is raw potential itself. And we can collate that to the different octogram types, and especially for the UDF types, the inferior is kind of the last glimmer of hope they have, but it's still a powerful glimmer because of the journey that the inferior can take to be the most powerful function in your mind. So exposure and potential are some of the things that we talk about more in the course, are really, really important to ego hacking your fear.
Exposure therapy is best. It's so important. I mean, I remember when my what I call my midlife crisis. I remember when it started, and it started October 17th, 2021, and I was already in process of reverting back to UDUF from UDSF at that time within my own life, and I broke my foot doing a Krav Maga test for martial arts. I broke my foot in the process, and just realizing once again, oh yeah, I really am fragile, and I really can go too far. It absolutely hit me, and then that just solidified my UDUF perspective, and here I am back in UDUF once again, always having to claw my way out of the bucket while the other crabs in the bucket are keeping me down, that kind of a thing. And the reality is that I've had to force myself to expose my inferior function. I've had to force myself to lean into the adversity, knowing that if I lean into the adversity, maybe I could swallow all of the adversity. It's kind of like when you're drowning in the ocean, but you think to yourself, maybe I could swallow the entire ocean and still live. That's basically the perspective that I end up having. Right. Except with any hero, I, for some reason, think that it's actually possible that I could swallow all of the ocean of that adversity and then make my SI inferior strong enough so that I don't have to face any adversity anymore. And we talk about this concept about how NI users, for example, they really need courage. The fear doesn't really go away. Courage is like fear management. They're managing that fear, right? But then we also talk about the concept of fearlessness, which is from the introverted sensing perspective, right? Where it actually ends up, you become so strong, or you could say maybe you become so numb, from the UDUF perspective, but you're actually so strong and you've taken so many hits, you've got all that scar tissue on your soul that nothing else can actually break it anymore because it's so hard. It's as hard as concrete. It's as hard as titanium. It's not going to be broken anymore, that you don't really have to be afraid of anything because you've suffered it all. I actually was telling someone earlier today, someone close to me, it's like, you know what? I accept you exactly for who you are. And I accept you for who you're going to become and your potential. There's literally nothing else in life that you could do to me because through you, I have experienced it all. I have experienced all of that pain already. There's really nothing else that you could actually do to me at this point. There just really isn't. And, being able to say that, it's interesting because, I just know that, for me personally, I don't have to be afraid anymore because I've seen it all, I've done it all within those contexts for those specific things. And, that's something that, being able to understand the difference between fearlessness and courage, it's been great. But the thing is that, I have NI nemesis, right? I have SI inferior. They're both gateway functions in that I have to oscillate between courage and fearlessness simultaneously. But having their guidance functions available to actually bring those forward, the critic, for the nemesis, and then ultimately the parent function, or the child for the inferior, basically, from that perspective. That's so critical, and that's the thing is that I, as a UDF person, I fed my guidance function, my child function, to my demon first, and I have to get to the point where I realize that, what, I need to stop having this glass half empty perspective and actually start realizing that there are people that like me. There are people that do accept me. There are people who are grateful for what I do for them. There are people who give me appreciation. It's just like that biblical verse. I think it's in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Finally, my brothers, whatever is XYZ things, whatever is good, whatever is perfect, whatever is righteous, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Think about those things. And I think that's the Apostle Paul making the argument hey, if you're UDUF, stop being this glass half empty person and start being a glass half full person, because you just really need to look at the world and see what's in front of you. And that's the thing, from a UDUF perspective, you just have to take back your child function. You just have to trust in your gut that your child function actually does matter. That's really the process. You got to take back your child function, and eventually, naturally, your hero will come back, as a result, because the hero is like, oh, the child is around. I have something that I can perform for because my number one fan is back. Because the hero doesn't really want to do anything with its number one fan, because let's be honest, unless it's warrior energy, but that's another thing entirely, So anyway, it's people are asking what your type is. He's an INFJ. Thank you. This is John Bodine, folks. Yes.
Make them guess.
Yeah. People like to like to say that John Bodine is the oracle of C.S. Joseph. They say that all the time in the Ego Hacker server.
Right.
Yeah. John Bodine is the Plato of the Ego Hacker community, for sure, in every way. I think he's the reincarnation of Plato, personally. That's just me. But the reality of the situation is, folks, is that, like, again, you got to learn how to ego hack yourself. We have ego hacking by text, which talks about how to ego hack other people and type them through text and ego hack them by text, and that's how that works, right? Pretty awesome. But what about yourself? What about you being able to take responsibility for your own functions? I'm an ENTP. I'm a UDUF variant. I have to take responsibility and get myself out of UDF and get out of the despair and get into a hope path from a UDSF perspective. That's what I have to do. And that is my responsibility to do that. But how do I know to do that? And the thing is that, like, we got into this course, and the ENTP episode for the ENTP section of the course came around. It's 2 hours long. And I got to be honest with you, man. I was on the brink. Like there's a couple of times where, like, I was tearing up. I was having a really hard time, even just in that video and that
was a painful one for sure.
It was extremely painful, but I walked away from it. Changed, because it's like, okay, now I personally know what I need to do. I know what I need to prioritize to be able to move things forward in my own life. And it's funny, we even had a screening with Railgun, for example, and she had the exact same reaction, to the ESTP, the exact same reaction. And inside of the course, we have this concept known as the silver bullet, basically. And I have a way that I describe this silver bullet, but how would you describe the importance of the silver bullet and what we call the silver bullet?
Well, it's your kind of, it's a thing that only you could do. I feel like it's the Chase's brainchild for the Ego Hacking Your Fear course, and the silver bullet is a piece of practical information, a nugget that, if utilized even at all, but especially if utilized well, is kind of on its own going to provide a path to transformation that perhaps you've been looking for your entire life. It's that dense, it's that meaningful, it's that important, and it's something a little different, or in some cases very different from type to type. And it's I don't want to say too much about it, because it's kind of, I think it's something best experienced through each lecture, but it's a little nugget that I don't think people will be expecting or ready for even.
Yeah, I don't even tell you what it is. You even told me, don't tell me what it is.
I don't want to know. I want to react in the moment as we're talking and presenting. And it's been fun for me every time. It's like, wow, that's unexpected, but that I totally see that. And doing the INFJ one the other day was extremely exciting for that.
What was your reaction when you had the silver bullet for the INFJ unveiled?
Well, it's weird when you can see an argument for, oh my God, like that can actually deal with all of this, with most of the issues you're going to come across with your inferior, most of the issues you're going to come across with overusing your hero, or forgetting things, or using your parent the wrong way. I just saw how effective that little simple silver bullet that you provided could just be utilized for basically everything in your psychological growth. So it's really something I wouldn't want to miss out on. I am happy that I get to witness it every lecture that we do. So
yeah, I liken it as if the functions are ultimately like dominoes, and once you have the silver bullet and you use the silver bullet, all of the other functions on both the circuits, the guidance circuit and the gateway circuit, they just all fall in line. They just fall in line. And then it's just this one thing that creates this cascading effect in your mind to get you exactly where you need to be with your inferior function, to arm your inferior function, and to free the inferior from the grip of fear and get it into its aspirational mode, so that you have so much more to live for, so that you see how life actually is so much better than it is. I mean, right now, like, a lot of the personal stuff that I'm dealing with right now in my life, and I have never been so challenged personally in my life than I am challenged right now. But it's so exciting. It's so exciting. It's like I'm having my passion come back to me, and and I'm finding myself, slowly getting out of the UDF and closer to the UDSF. And really, that ENTP episode, and just understanding the entire process and how all the dominoes fit together, and then how the silver bullet comes into play. And and it's so funny because, like, when you finally learn what the silver bullet actually is for yourself, it's like, oh, you know what? I've done that a few times. I have done that a few times, and then when it's exposed to you, and it's like when you finally can articulate it, you finally can actually see what it is and where it's taken you in your life, right? You actually can see that, and it's like, oh, all I gotta do is focus on that one thing that I do every now and then naturally. Oh, okay, I'll do that. And I gotta be honest, like, ever since I started like hyper focusing on it, things have just gotten so much better. I mean, it's led to because now, like, for example, like, I read a lot, all of a sudden, all of my tutelage, all of my training, all of my learning, it's finally been focused, because I finally realized it's like, okay, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to focus on. And then as a result of that, I find myself becoming stronger, actually, as a person. I think the number one thing that I've gained on this journey, and through, Ego Hacking Your Fear, creating this course, as well as, facing a lot of my own personal demons within my life, I really have become a much stronger person, because, like, I entirely lacked self-discipline before, to the point where I was actually, like, ruining other people's lives, around me, and harming people and harming their relationships. And that's not someone I want to be. I never want to be that. And because of my silver bullet, and then utilizing it to the fullest, I've been able to bring myself to a point where I am a lot stronger. I have that self-discipline that I've never had before. And, like, it's so interesting because, like, I didn't even realize that, like, ever since doing it, like, I was naturally, like, starting to act like, Bruce Lee's philosophy, as stated in the book by John Little, called The Warrior Within, and just kind of bend instead of be that oak tree, that just breaks in the wind, basically, which is not unlike a high chair tyrant, basically, from the king energy perspective. So that's kind of like the direction that I've ultimately taken it. But it's been so much better for people in my personal life that I have done this, because now I don't see myself as someone who's alienating them. I don't see someone who's being, like, sadistically malevolent towards them. I don't see myself as someone who is trying to control them all the time because I'm overprotective of my inferior function. Instead, I'm choosing to utilize my functions to empower my inferior function, so that my inferior function can actually act out its purpose. And the only reason I've even been able to do that is as a result of utilizing the silver bullet within my own life. So again, folks, the silver bullet is this one concept. They're usually at the very end of each of the individual 16 type sections within the Ego Hacking Your Fear course, where you actually get to learn specifically, the one thing that, if you focus on just that one thing, you get to basically unlock the rest of your guidance and gateway circuit to get you very fast success in your life. It really is. And it's been an enigma. It's been an entire mystery to, in my opinion, Jungian depth psychologist ever. And you and I have the honor and privilege of exposing it to the rest of the world. It's absolutely incredible. I mean, in my opinion, by far, Ego Hacking Your Fear is absolutely the best work that we have ever produced. And it is the best one ever. And like I said, all the screenings that we've done with the various people that have looked at certain episodes, like, it's been life-changing for every single one of them. And it's not, and this course is not so much about, like, typing people or learning how to do that. It's more about like being able to properly self-reflect and actually take inventory of your soul and actually act in the areas that you can act and should be acting in. And that's the most important thing.
It's kind of this self-therapy approach too, if you want to use it that way. But of course, just using the tools available in this personality, Jungian psychology sphere. So, yeah, it's a good time, or maybe not a good time, but a necessary time, especially for the more painful lectures. So,
yeah, well, never not have more pain. Always more, right? Pain.
I think the audience is used to that by now after being with you for so long. So.
Oh yeah, well, never do that. I mean, I don't know when the Templar abuse lecture is going to drop on YouTube. Maybe tomorrow. I don't know, but the Crusader abuse one was extremely painful for me to do, and then the Templar one is painful. And I did the Wayfarer one, and oh my god, the Wayfarer one just kind of like wow, kind of like blew up in my face. Basically, that was also very painful. But the reality of the situation is like. We made this course, folks. It's the sequel to Season 19. It goes even deeper than Season 19. Most people hailed Season 19 as the best work that we've ever done for many years, but this is everything. And it's 30 hours of video content. It is huge. It is large. And by the way, when you guys get it, you instantly get access to all of Season 19, that you can log in and have access to it. No problem within csjoseph.life/portal, which is pretty awesome. And then also we have the masterclass where we're going even further, where we're going to be discussing how the octagram basically influences your nurture, influences the guided circuit and the gateway circuit, which is also really incredible. And it's so funny, John, because oftentimes a lot of people don't even realize what the value of the masterclass actually is. And then we did ego hacking by text, and people are like, the masterclass, who cares? It doesn't matter that much. It's just an appendix, right? And then people watch the masterclass and they're like, oh my God, that fundamentally changes everything that was presented in the course even more. And we also released something that fundamentally changed everyone's understanding of the science entirely, which is the Rosetta Stone. But hey,
and this one, we're going to go a lot further than even the course can go. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I am very, very excited about that. And what's really great is that we're going to be talking about the octagrid, and we're going to be looking at let's see here. Cognitive origins. We're going to be looking at the temple wheels in all these different directions, and then how the guidance functions and the gateway functions are influencing that, directly being influenced by nurture. And it will open up an additional pathway, for personal growth to get you to in your aspiration mode. Because the reality of the situation is, folks, is that if you really want to be happy in your life, you need to be aspiring with your inferior function, but you're never really going to do that if you are consistently within the grips of fear. As much as like I always tell the TE tricksters, someone's opinion of you does not have to become your reality. And Les Brown said that, and it's absolutely critical. That you understand that there is a path forward, that you can become a better you, that you do have a future. We, you and I, John, for this community, we definitely know the plans that we have for this community to not harm them and to prosper them and to give them a future and a hope. And that's what we are doing definitely with this course to that end. So, is there anything else we need to cover, or did we cover?
I said everything I need to say. I think.
I think I did too.
Gave some interesting hints and had a good conversation. So thanks for having me on. This was fun. Are we gonna do anything else, or are we gonna call it there?
No, I think we're good. And also Eid Mubarak to all of our Muslim listeners as well. Happy Eid, folks. and enjoy yourselves. And thank you all for being a part of our community, as well as our Christian audiences and our agnostic audience and our atheist audience. We just get everyone within the Ego Hack community. We just let them all in. Everyone's welcome. Everyone's here, and we love you all. And by the way, if you want to get in on the Ego Hacker community, discord.gg/Ego Hackers. Get into the Discord server, and please verify and get your tags set up and join our special interest groups and just add to the discussion. We are here. We have a whole team, and it's been absolutely miraculous what we've been able to accomplish in so little amount of time. I mean, even from right here, we got 1,648 people, most of which are active, which is incredible to have such a very active Discord server, and definitely want to get in and join it as soon as possible. So, all right, all that being said, folks, just want to give you guys a reminder. Here is EgoHackingYourFear.com. This is the landing page. Get it while you can. We are pre-ordering it. Pre-order price is $100. It's $97. And after about 2 weeks, it will officially launch, because we're taking pre-orders for it right now, and it will be $150 at $147 after about 2 weeks. And it includes immediate access to Season 19. This is our pre-order right now. We are taking pre-orders on Ego Hacking Your Fear, and that is at EgoHackingYourFear.com. So anyway, folks, thanks for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys next time. Later.